Hey guys, Ben Paint here. Today we are back at Teamsport Bristol once again. However, this time we are competing in a HEATSEEKER Elite Members event. To give you guys the rundown for this event, it was split into a practice session of 5 minutes, a qualifying session of 10 minutes, which you are watching now, as I didn't want to give you too much of me just driving around and hitting the barriers early in the session. This was then followed by a 12-minute heat, which obviously the grid was positioned from the qualifying positions. The second heat then consists of another 12-minute race. However, this was a reverse grid from the results that were obtained in the first heat. So if you finished in first place in the first heat, then you would start in last place for the second heat, and if you finished in second place in the first heat, then you would start in second last, etc, etc. And then the last heat then consisted of completely random allocated grid positions, and we'll see where I end up later on. However, before we get into the majority of the video, I would just like to say, please could you subscribe if you are new here, and also could you leave a like if you do enjoy the video, since it really does help me out, and the channel once more has been growing a lot recently, and I'd just like to say a big thank you to all of you that are already subscribed. However, as we do jump in to our fastest qualifying lap of the session, which I believe was my 7th or 8th lap, we do come across the line with a 37.991, and this isn't the fastest lap I've ever done, it wasn't the worst, and I did end up qualifying in 9th position. As mentioned, as we get underway, straight away I did qualify in 9th place out of 11th, and we got away quite well here, getting right into the train of karts in front. There was a lot of loading here in the first race, just bumping through the first section, really getting hit from behind there, and that meant that I did lose a lot of momentum to the 4 or 5 drivers that were ahead of me, and therefore I did have to start playing catch up, looking behind me there, just covering off the inside line to make sure that I didn't get overtaken. There you can see ahead of us my fellow YouTube friend Matthew Odie, just taking the inside line on George, who was also ahead of me here. George was also another middleweight that is in the same category for the BIKC alongside me, and I really did want to give him a good battle in this event to try and finish ahead of him if I can, and prove to myself that I could in fact be the second fastest middleweight at the Bristol track at the moment, as I'm currently 3rd behind him and Kelvin. We do skip ahead a few laps here, as this was the train that had formed. We stayed in the same sort of positions for the whole heat by about 8 or 9 laps now into the race this was, and I really was looking to stick an overtake on George and try and get past. As you can see, there was a train of 5 of us at this point. I think we were separated by only around a second and a half, which was very good, and I did manage to create a gap to the 2 drivers behind me, as they were also heavyweight drivers, and I was expected to be a little bit quicker on the track than them. But you can see in the top left, my fastest lap of this session was in fact a 37.513, which isn't my best, but it's also not the worst considering that we were stuck in a train of karts for the whole race. But here, getting a little bit of a decent exit out of the bottom hairpin, but it just wasn't enough to try and close up to the drivers ahead, and this is sort of how the race panned out for the last 12 minutes going around the track, and therefore this was in fact the last lap of the first heat. As you can see there on the left, one of the marshals waving the checkered flag. I looked to the left here to see if I did have a better run coming out the final corner. However, I didn't, and therefore I finished the first heat in 9th position, which I wasn't too happy with. However, I did start quite far back on the grid. So this was the second heat of 3 that was being completed on the evening, and here we started in 3rd position as we finished in 9th out of 11, which meant I was 3rd from the back, and this led to me being 3rd from the front. And here we can see straight away off the start, I really wanted to try and push my way up into 2nd around the driver ahead. However, we were stopped under yellow flag conditions here, since I do believe that someone had been spun out on the first corner with all other karts in that area, and it was lucky that I also didn't, going around the outside of kart number 11. I did almost get spun out, but we managed to back off, and here we stopped under red flags, and of course I took a massive shunt from the person behind who missed the red flag. However, here once again still under yellow flags here a lap later, and we were sticking behind the 2 drivers ahead, and I really wanted to get as good an exit on the car as possible. However, the race wasn't restarting here, and I was checking back left and right because the car felt like it was shaking a bit too much. I don't know if it's from the bash that I'd sustained on the previous lap, but it did actually have me a little bit worried for the performance of the kart for the rest of the race. And here straight away right back into the green flag, and there I tried to take a little bit of a wider line to get a better exit, and instead I just got it completely wrong, and this led to me leaving a bit of a gap to the people in first and second. But this did not really affect me, as I thought that I would be able to catch up to them and hopefully overtake them and secure my first win at the track in an elite event. At this point in the evening I really felt that I was getting into the groove of the track and learning the lines that I was needing to take with the amount of grip that was available, and here you can see gaining a lot of time through the Mickey Mouse section, really closing up to 2 people ahead and trying to get this hairpin right, and once more just closing up. And obviously, as I'm a middleweight driving, the 2 drivers ahead are heavyweight drivers, it did mean that I was able to have more of a run up the hill. Here I took a little bit of a wider line going into these 2 corners, as they were driving a little bit more defensive compared to me, and this meant once again that I can have a better line to catch up to them. I found that I continually went into the last corner with a bit too much speed on multiple occasions. As you saw there, my hands were all over the place, and another thing that I was really trying to get a hold of in this evening was to try and make sure that I wasn't loading going into the Mickey Mouse section. As we saw in my previous race event, I did just happen to continually hit the driver ahead over and over again, and that resulted in a penalty. So I really wanted to focus this evening on trying to stay as close to the drivers ahead as possible, which I am now, but without hitting them. And now I looked for the inside, but didn't quite have as much overspeed as I thought I would, backing off a little bit to try and get a better run up the last corner, and I'm almost touching the driver ahead of me as I'm getting so close to them. And here, as I said, just trying to back off a little bit into this first corner, but not backing off so much that I lose time to the people ahead, as that's something that I was also trying to think about. And here you can see I really was getting a better run, the driver ahead really closing the door on me, so I can't nip down the inside and try and take the position on my favourite corner for overtaking. And here again, just trying to stay as tidy as possible, smooth as possible on both pedals, and this meant that I was able to really close up and keep in good stead for the rest of the race. As mentioned previously, I found that in other events I got a bit too over ambitious and tried to push too far forward for more positions rather than just maintaining the position I was in. And here you'll see I switched to the left and then go back to the right, but I did take a bit of a shunt from the driver behind, and this meant that I went wide, and therefore I did tuck in behind them, tried to go up the inside, and just as I mentioned, just get a bit too over excited trying to get the position back, and this meant that I slipped down once more behind Matt and George. So now I was down in 5th place. I really was a little bit frustrated with myself there, as I didn't lose just 1 place, but I also lost 2, and shaking my head and shaking my hand, I really wasn't happy with how that went. And this is how we stayed for the next few laps, and we can see here once more everyone in the train at this point. There's the top 5 people here. Mark was leading the way, followed by Jason, then it was Matt and George, and I was in 5th place. So I really did want to try and make an overtake and gain back the positions that I'd lost, since I really wasn't feeling too happy with how the race has gone so far. And there, that lap was in fact my fastest lap of the session so far, with 37.861, getting loaded a little bit here and bumped around by the person behind me, so trying to go a little bit defensive, but instead I seem to leave a bit too much room on the exit, and this is becoming a bit of a theme here on this bottom hairpin. Now I tried to slip in behind the driver in 5th now, but then Ryan and Henry seemed to both have overtaken me there, and this meant I was stuck down in 7th. So I'd gone from 3rd to 7th. You can see me there shaking my head, really was a bit disappointed with how the race was going, as I was leaking positions all over the place, and I was trying to keep up with the drivers ahead, but you can see they are just slipping away, and a lap later you can see they're still at the same point, even though I've just set my fastest lap of 37.790, and I did have Kelvin behind me, who we all know is a very fast driver here, and he does a beautiful switch to the left and then back to the right on me there and end up ahead of me, which I'm completely not mad about, since I could see it coming. He was closing up behind me. I was trying to cut him off, but he did perform a very nice overtake on me, and therefore I really want to stick behind him at this point and try and maintain the gap. But you can see already he's pulling away, and at this point in the session my head really was starting to drop, and in terms of the whole evening my head was starting to drop as I was just getting further and further back from the drivers ahead. Here we can see there's a bit of a kerfuffle here. I was trying to follow Kelvin through the corner, but he does let Matt back ahead, but Matt does go quite wide again, and this meant that I was able to nip up the inside there and go back up into 7th place. However, this still wasn't as high as 3rd where I started from, and I really thought I could do some damage from starting that far ahead, but instead I was languishing in mid-pack. This really was disappointing for myself, as you can see in the top left my fastest lap was a 37.790, which really wasn't quick enough on the evening, and I know in myself that I really can go a lot faster than a 37.5, which was in fact my fastest lap of the evening, and therefore I just was getting gapped by everyone else. I was a lot slower than everyone else, and I'm not entirely sure why. I just wasn't fitting properly in the car and the format, and here I tried to keep a nice tight line, but instead Harrison there just lunges down my inside. I try and take him back here on the hairpin, but unfortunately he does just park the car in the right place. I tried to go down the inside, but decided against it, and at this point I really felt like I leaked so many positions, my head had dropped, and I just felt in a really bad mood, to be honest, going around here. I didn't really see what the point was, as I was just dropping position after position, and I really wasn't enjoying myself in this situation. And the upsetting thing is, this is the complete opposite to my first event that I had in an elite session, and there you can see we do skip ahead to the end of the race because nothing else changed, and we crossed the line in 8th position. However, after a few contact penalties from the people ahead, we did in fact finish in 6th place, which I still wasn't too happy with. Here we moved on into the 3rd heat and the final one of the evening, and this was random grids, and I will give you one guess where I started. Definitely in last place. So here I started in 11th place, behind arguably 4 of the fastest drivers: Harrison, Kelvin, Henry and Ryan, and therefore this was going to be a very difficult task to even keep up with them, let alone cause an overtake. And there I did look for a little lunge up the inside of Ryan, as Kelvin and Henry were having a little scrap, and there once again I tried to push up the inside of Henry here, and I really did think that I had a position in the bag, but seeing from his weight, he did just absolutely shoot up the ramp, even though he had a very poor exit there. I looked for the inside again and touched him around the corners, but instead he managed to drive off, and straight away the 3 of them did push away, and this is where my head completely went, especially after the last heat, and therefore I managed to go around the rest of the track here in a very, very, very bad mood. And I found and realised straight away, even with Henry shaking his head, he was still pulling away from me, and I was unable to actually close up to him and even force an overtake. And there you can see me taking my hands off the wheel in disbelief really at how bad I really was doing, and therefore I did very much give up at this point. I didn't want to come off the track and give up completely, but I did just carry on driving around at a more leisurely pace compared to really going flat out. I really was disappointed at the way that this event had come out, and here you'll see we are crossing the line for my fastest lap of this heat, and this was also in fact the last lap of the heat, as I did decide in the last few laps just to really try and get a bit of a faster lap timing secured, so I can try and get higher up in the BIKC, as I did forget that all lap times do actually calculate across into that the fastest 3 laps, and unfortunately I wasn't even able to get as fast a lap as I did in the first heat. So here we are coming across the line now in 11th place, and with some of the penalties that were dished out in this one, I did in fact finish in 8th position rather than 11th, although I did still end up in 11th place overall for the evening, which obviously I wasn't too happy with going home, and I was in a bit of a bad mood. However, this does bring us to the end of the video, and I hope that you enjoyed watching, even though I didn't do as well as I could have. I really enjoyed being in a competitive scenario despite the result, and I hope that you enjoyed the video too. If you did, could you please leave a like and subscribe for more videos in the future, as I have some more coming soon. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Take care.